Correct. What are we doing? Respiration. A capsule. Phases of respiration. We haven't done, no? So we have completed digestion, we have completed nutrition, respiration, half of it. No, respiration, the three methods, the three pathways of glucose breakdown. That is done?
Yes, ma'am. Now we were doing the rate of breathing in aquatic organisms.
What are the phases of respiration?
एंटीबायोटिक कितना अच्छा काम किया देखा? एंटीबायोटिक ने कितना अच्छा काम किया? अभी एंटीबायोटिक का डोज इफेक्ट ओवर हो जाएगा ना तो फिर से और स्ट्रॉन्ग एंटीबायोटिक लेंगे जब तक 85 above marks नहीं आए. Every test I am going to assess your marks. जिसका मार्क्स 50% से कम आया उसके तो हाल खत्म हो जाएगा. ओवरऑल साइंस 50% से नीचे आएगा तो यहाँ पे आना बंद कर देंगे. कोई मतलब नहीं. आ रहा है बात समझ में? क्या बोला मैंने? यहाँ पे यूट्यूब पे आना बंद. ठीक है? पढ़ाई कितने लोग पढ़ाई कर रहे हो अभी? स्टार्ट किया? यहाँ तक की है? पढ़ाई करो. 10th standard में हो, you should start your portions right from now. All subjects, not only biology. Biology manage हो जाएगा, but overall science में perfect score लाने की कोशिश करो. If you are planning to go ahead with science, तो science में perfect score लाने की कोशिश करो. Overall, all the three subjects में अच्छा marks होना पड़ेगा. Okay? So now respiration. What was the definition of respiration we studied? What is the definition of respiration? क्या था? Intake and
biological process in which food is breakdown released outside water and energy.
मत करो. Not reading. Did you understand what is respiration? Respiration is
the biological process in which the
food is broken
down into CO2
and
CO2,
carbon dioxide and
energy.
So ये सबसे important concept we had studied the other day. Respiration means breakdown of glucose, food. So ये जो process of breakdown of glucose we studied the other day, for breakdown of glucose for organisms like us, what is necessary? Oxygen. So if the breakdown of food is in the presence of oxygen, what is that process called? Did we complete that aerobic and anaerobic?
Yes, ma'am.
So if the process of glucose breakdown is in the presence of oxygen, for example, like us, aerobic respiration. Give two examples of aerobic organisms. What did I tell you the other day? All developed organisms which has developed respiratory structures. I talk about the fish. Do they have respiratory structures? Yes, gills. The frogs and the reptiles. All the big mammals that we see around, the birds we see around, do they have developed respiratory structures? Yes. So if they have respiratory structures, they are able to take in oxygen. If they are able to take in oxygen, the body is made up in such a way that वो oxygen utilize करने का machine भी होनी चाहिए cells के अंदर. So what is that structure, organelle जो oxygen को use कर सके? Mitochondria. So any organism which has developed respiratory structure will definitely have large number of mitochondria in their cells. And hence, the glucose breakdown in their body will always be in the presence of oxygen, that is aerobic method. So what is aerobic respiration? Breakdown of glucose in the presence of oxygen to give rise to carbon dioxide, water and how many molecules of ATP? 8 molecules of ATP. But then, if I now talk about the bacteria, other day I told you, bacteria is in the same environment like us. But they cannot take in oxygen like we do. They don't have any respiratory structures at all. So that's the reason their cell does not have mitochondria. क्योंकि mitochondria अगर होगा भी तो क्या फायदा? कोई फायदा नहीं है. So the body is made up that way. उनके cells में mitochondria है ही नहीं. So oxygen अंदर नहीं जा रहा है, mitochondria है नहीं, but जो glucose whatever is getting formed in their body, how will that glucose break down? उनको भी थोड़ा बहुत energy चाहिए. So how will that glucose break down in the absence of oxygen? And now to produce what compounds? In the cells of the bacteria and the yeast, do they have oxygen inside? No, they don't, because they don't have mitochondria, no structures for respiration. But then glucose जो है, how will the glucose break down in the absence of oxygen? So products क्या है? What are the products? Ethanol or ethyl alcohol, water, and how many molecules? 2 molecules of ATP. So what is this process of glucose breakdown known as? This process is known as anaerobic. So aerobic and anaerobic का major difference आया समझ में? Always to remember, the simple organisms always they show anaerobic method. The complex organisms always they will show aerobic method. But is it possible that we, the most complex group of organisms, we show anaerobic pathway at times?
Yes.
Possible है? Yes. At times. Temporarily, at times, when our muscle contraction is very fast. Vigorous muscular activity जब होती है, then the rate of muscle contraction is much faster than after running. During running, or maybe now you are climbing up the steps very fast. So what is the first change in your body when you are climbing up the stairs very fast? Breathing rate increase. क्यों breathing rate increase हो रहा है? Because muscles are contracting fast. Body में और भी ज़्यादा oxygen चाहिए, so breathing rate is faster. You are running, you are walking, you are writing in your exam also बहुत fast लिख रहे हो. Did you ever experience that your hand muscles starts aching? Yes, because contraction is faster and now your hand muscles require more oxygen. So the first thing that happens is breathing rate increase हो जाता है. But if this continues for a long time, I talk about an athlete running a 400-meter race. So what's happening? The person is running fast for a long period of time now. So वो जो exhaustion हुआ, ache हुआ, still he is going on. Ache हो रहा है, exhaustion हो रहा है, he is feeling that tiredness, but still he is going on, meaning अभी body में oxygen deficiency इतना ज़्यादा हो गया कि now possible that he may suffer from muscular cramps. Cramps मतलब एक massive pain होता है in the muscles, especially the leg muscles. So there will be a massive pain, and then the muscles are contracting and relax नहीं होता है. Muscles are not relaxing back. क्यों? क्योंकि muscles में एक compound form हो गया है. What is that compound? What is that compound? Lactic acid. Lactic acid. क्यों? क्योंकि glucose did not get oxygen, and the process of anaerobic respiration has started now. But since हमारे muscle cells में ethanol बन सकता है, can our muscle cells in this process can start producing ethanol? No, never. क्योंकि still हमारे muscle cells में oxygen थोड़ा बहुत तो है. Then how is our muscle cells in this condition? The muscle cells of an athlete and the bacterial cell, how are they different? Bacterial cell में कभी भी oxygen नहीं है, permanently absent. Muscle cells में maybe just 5% oxygen is present. जो 95% होनी चाहिए, 5% है, 10% है, 25% है. So that means small amount of oxygen is there. We are not saying that absent है, lack है, deficiency है, but not absent. So since deficiency है, जो 95% होना चाहिए, अब just 15-20% है, so that's the reason glucose cannot break down to carbon dioxide and 38 molecules. So अब क्या हो रहा है? Product क्या हो गया? दूसरा कुछ हो गया, lactic acid हो गया. अब जब lactic acid accumulate होने लगा in the muscle of that athlete, he is suffering from pain, but he is still going on. He is suffering from exhaustion, tiredness, but still he is going on. But a time comes when he is not able to run any further. He collapses. He collapse हुआ because the muscles have become stiff. एकदम stiff हो गया. He is not able to step forward. इसको बोलेंगे cramps. Quite often we also suffer from cramps. So that is the difference between muscular cramps anaerobic respiration in organisms like us and in case of the bacteria. You may get a question, does human cells show anaerobic pathway? Yes. But is it permanent? No, that is not a permanent process. It's a temporary process. So when you suffer from cracks, what do you do? Do we rush to the hospital for this? No. Then what do? We take a period of rest. So ये 10 मिनट का rest में क्या हुआ? The muscle contraction and intake of oxygen एक जब same level पे आ गया, then the muscles are relaxed back again. So now that you are writing, now your muscles, hand muscles are not aching. जैसे तुम लोगों के तो hand muscles ऐसे भी एक और हो जाता है. So now normally when you are writing, hand muscles are not supposed to ache. क्यों? Rate of breathing and contraction same range पे है. So muscles are getting oxygen. Are you clear? So the main products, when glucose is broken down completely, oxygen, 38 molecules of ATP, oxygen utilized to break down glucose completely. If the oxygen is absent, glucose is broken down, partial, incomplete. The products क्या है? Ethanol, 2 molecules of ATP. And the lactic acid concept, is it clear? Muscular cramps, fatigue, all these questions you should be able to answer. Differences between aerobic and anaerobic respiration we have written. Yes. The concept of anaerobic respiration, ethanol. What is the concept of anaerobic respiration? What is it also known as? I explained you the other day. What is this pathway also known as? Anaerobic respiration. What is this pathway also known as? Anaerobic process of glucose breakdown where alcohol is getting formed. What is this process also known as? You had written down, मैंने लिखा था नीचे. What is that process also known as? Alcoholic fermentation. लिखा था? Fermentation. That is also called fermentation. Incomplete breakdown of glucose. What are those organisms we had mentioned which shows alcoholic fermentation? So I gave you some common examples. At home, in all our homes, when we make the batter of idli dosa, we make the curd, we make the dough of the bread and the buns, all involve fermentation. Okay? But this process has got great economic importance in the process of cheese making, yogurt making, bread bun pastry making, wine making, and various other different type of beverage making. This process is used. Bacteria and yeast is used in this process. So alcoholic fermentation is a process of great economic importance. If you get for 2 marks, what are you supposed to write? You'll have to give examples. First of all, you have to write down the equation. Happening in what type of organisms? The bacteria and the yeast. And these type of organisms are cultured in the process of making curd. Now just think of this curd, those tubs of curd that we get in the shops. Amul and this and so many different type of varieties, Mother Dairy and Amul, all of you have seen that. So this is made in the industries in hundreds and hundreds per day. So how much of the curd they make from milk? By the process of alcoholic fermentation. So the process of fermentation is done in a large scale. In our own homes, we are doing only for 3-4 of us. In a small scale, we do at home. But in the industries, they have to grow the bacteria in large numbers, yeast in large numbers, for making of the cakes and the pastries and the bun and the curd and the different type of beverages. So we'll answer some questions later. Let us go ahead with the chapter now. Phases. So after the types, modes of respiration, now we move on to phases of respiration. Meaning what? We have done that? Phases here? Breathing and all these things done? Breathing done? Okay.
Not all gaseous. Just breathing is done.
Breathing is done.
Few more are there.
Okay. So breathing, now that we have come across the concept of breathing. What is breathing? What did we learn the other day? Breathing, the process of intake of air till the lungs and giving out air from the lungs. Okay. That is breathing. Now, as breathing takes place, after breathing what? The lungs are filled with air. After breathing, the lungs are filled with air. But we are going to learn now what happens to the different type of gaseous components which we have in air. Just think and tell me that when we are inhaling the air, are we only inhaling oxygen?
No.
So many different type of gases. Gases containing nitrogen, sulfur, phosphorus, carbon compounds, all we are inhaling. But our body has got certain systems of taking in only the oxygen to the deeper cells and the tissues by the way of the blood. Then what happens to the other nitrogen and the sulfur and the phosphorus and the carbon compounds? They are remaining in the lungs itself. They don't go inside. They are remaining in the lungs itself. When we exhale, they will be removed out from the body. And this oxygen will go deep down by the blood to the body cells and then break down the food. So breaking down the food, that part already you are aware. Breaking down of food with the help of oxygen, that is typical respiration. So now that we talk about the phases, what are the different phases we are going to learn now? Phases of respiration. The definition of respiration, I will again ask, see that you are clear. What is the concept of definition? Breakdown of food to produce carbon dioxide, water and energy. So that should be the standard statement that you write. Yes, if you are writing with the help of oxygen to produce 38 molecules of ATP that side, that is even more perfect definition. Phases of respiration. We had already been talking about breathing the other day. Breathing, the different stages we had studied. Today we will have to cover up the rest of the chapter, that is gaseous exchange you will have to study. Gaseous exchange. Next is a concept of tissue respiration. Next is a concept of tissue respiration, followed by cellular respiration. Tissue respiration followed by a concept of cellular respiration. So we are going to understand breathing and all these three steps, and all these three are one after the other. They are just related processes simultaneously happening in the body. Let us first write down the definitions. Breathing we are done. We will
Yes, ma'am.
the next definition write down gaseous exchange. First get acquainted what are these processes that you are going to learn. Gaseous exchange write down. Gaseous exchange, the diffusion of gaseous exchange, the diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide. I'm sorry, let's write one way first. The diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide carbon. The diffusion of oxygen from the alveolus. Diffusion of oxygen from alveolus to the blood. And the diffusion of carbon dioxide from the blood diffusion of carbon dioxide from the blood to the alveolus is known as gaseous exchange.
Similar form of alveoli alveolus.
Alveolus. Diffusion of carbon dioxide from the blood to the alveoli. Full stop. Got all of you? Next head. This is gaseous exchange. Next definition, tissue respiration. Tissue respiration. Tissue respiration. The diffusion of oxygen from blood to tissues. Diffusion of oxygen from blood to tissues and carbon dioxide from tissues to blood. Carbon dioxide from tissues to blood is known as tissue respiration. The third definition, the last step, that is cellular respiration. Cellular respiration. The breakdown of glucose. The breakdown of glucose in the presence of oxygen. Breakdown of glucose in the presence of oxygen to release carbon dioxide and energy. To release carbon dioxide and energy in the body cells. Carbon dioxide and energy in the body cells.
Is there any chemical formula for energy?
Chemical formula for energy, yes, so many are there. If you talk about ATP, is the most standard form of energy released by the mitochondria. But there are so many other compounds also. Okay, so these are the typical definitions. Now that we learn the process, you'll every time try to tally. Is it actually what is the process we are learning? Then only you'll be able to understand, remember further. Again, we'll take one more question before I start explaining you the process. Just check. डायग्राम पेज तो ऐसे खाली के खाली रह गए. पेज खाली क्यों पड़ा है?
मेरा एक बड़ा बच्चे है, एक छोटा बच्चे है.
प्रोपोर्शनेट होना पड़ेगा ना डायग्राम. सो बिजी, टाइम ही नहीं मिला, आधा घंटा भी टाइम नहीं मिला कि थोड़ा बायोलॉजी का होमवर्क कर ले. हाँ, दिस इज ओके, दैट इज ओके. बॉडी नहीं बना. I told you the other day also, you can just pick up the diagram of the alimentary canal. No need of drawing the outer body. You are out of the class also and out of station also. नहीं किया diagram? Both of all of you, please check. I think only I get to see only one book where the work is done. This you correct little bit. What about you? You? टाइम नहीं मिला. देखो मैंने दिया था कि 2 क्वेश्चन की व्हेन यू गेट टू सी योर नोटबुक, देखते ही याद आएगा वो ब्लैंक पेजेस को इधर उधर कर रहे हैं, बट देन वो याद भी नहीं आ रहा है कि दैट वर्क हैज टू बी डन. बिफोर द नेक्स्ट क्लास दिस शुड बी डन. दिस वर्क शुड बी. नो, आई टोल्ड यू दैट हियर यू विल राइट डाउन फॉर द रेस्पिरेशन और व्हाट. What was the last topic you are writing here?
This complex question you gave, complex organization of human so anaerobic respiration reasons. And after that, one more question, what is fermentation? Then you want to write these 2 questions.
No, here only I was asking you continue with the respiration notes. Yeah. Now you can write, not a problem. Now you can write also. And then you continue there. Okay. So now look into this. After the 3 definitions, complete the 2 diagrams, all of you. Again I remind, complete karna. Before next class when you come, I should see your diagrams all done. Check whether you have written down this question. How are the lungs designed to carry out exchange of gases? Is that done with you? How are the lungs designed? How are the lungs designed done? What is the difference between oxygenated, deoxygenated blood done?
Yes, ma'am.
Then only 1 point rate of breathing in terrestrial organisms. One point. Okay. There I must have asked you leave space because जब हम circulation पढ़ेंगे, then you can add 1 or 2 more points in that statement, oxygenated, deoxygenated. Now the next thing to understand is, now that you are aware about the parts of the respiratory system, so we'll have to study about the parts of the respiratory system. Did you do? Respiratory system did we do? Respiratory system parts we had finished, so that's why I had asked you to complete the diagram. Now what are the parts of the respiratory system? Refer to the diagram in your textbook also. What are the parts of the respiratory system? Right from the beginning, tell me, what are the parts of the respiratory system? Nostrils, nasal passage, pharynx. What was the function of pharynx? Common passage for food and air. Larynx, trachea. What was one special feature of trachea? No, that is larynx. That is larynx. What was one special structural feature for trachea? I told you it has C-shaped cartilaginous rings. What is the significance of the C-shaped cartilaginous rings? Prevents the trachea from collapsing. Now that every time we breathe out, is the smooth tube-like structure, that soft tube-like structure, is it collapsing back? No, it is not collapsing back. It will maintain its diameter. How does it maintain its diameter? Because of the C-shaped cartilaginous rings on the outer wall. So what is the answer that you have to write? Again, please remember, after explaining some one or two more concepts, again I will give you now some few questions to answer on your own. So remember that. Again, I repeat, what is the significance of the C-shaped cartilaginous rings on the outer wall of the trachea? Your answer should be to prevent the collapsing of the trachea after breathing, exhalation. To prevent collapsing of the trachea even after exhalation, forceful exhalation. Say suppose whenever you are running, exhalation is very hard. At that time also, the trachea is not collapsing, it is maintaining a proper diameter. क्यों? But ये जरूरी क्यों है? Because if the trachea collapses, next inhalation में we have to put in a lot of effort and energy. But हमें समझ में भी नहीं. Every exhalation. After every forceful exhalation also, the trachea never collapses. Now, after all this basic concepts you are aware, the alveolus. What are alveolus? How did we define? What are alveolus? The structural and the functional unit of the lungs. What is the meaning? The lungs, when we talk about the lungs, made up of millions of small air sacs, and these air sacs are thin wall. What are the two special features of the alveolus? Thin wall and rich supply of blood vessels. Now, what are those blood vessels which are associated with the alveolus? Now, this is something first we have to come across before we try understanding gaseous exchange and all these. So, I start with the heart now. Two types of blood which is moving. I talk about the heart. The heart will give rise to certain blood vessels. What are those blood vessels? I first of all think of one blood vessel. This blood vessel is known as the pulmonary artery. So I'm talking about the first blood vessel, and this is known as the pulmonary artery. Now, what is the job of the pulmonary artery? The job of the pulmonary artery is to carry blood from the heart to the lungs. It will carry the blood from the heart to the lungs. But what type of blood is this pulmonary artery carrying? Deoxygenated. So when we are talking about the blood which is moving from the heart to the lungs, needs to be purified. That's why it is going towards the lungs. So now the blood which is moving from the heart to the lungs is having a lot of carbon dioxide. So what type of a blood is this pulmonary artery carrying? The blood that pulmonary artery carries is deoxygenated. So what is the name of the vessel? The name of the vessel is pulmonary artery. What type of blood it carries? It carries deoxygenated blood. How did we define deoxygenated blood? Blood which has a higher concentration of carbon dioxide than oxygen. Oxygen है, deoxygenated blood में oxygen is there. Yes, lesser than carbon dioxide. That's why. So this blood is deoxygenated. Then from the lungs, the blood will again come back to the heart. But now which vessel are we talking about? We are talking about the pulmonary vein. And what type of blood will the pulmonary vein carry? The blood which will be carried by the pulmonary vein is oxygenated. This will be now divided or broken up into a large number of smaller. Okay, no, straight away now we are not talking about this. I'll explain you all these things later. Right now you remember this only, the two major vessels and the type of the blood. First of all, this to remember, the blood supply to the lungs from the heart with the help of which vessels and what type of blood. So I'm saying that now that the heart is constantly giving away to certain type of vessels, you get to see this word artery. In the later part of the chapter, in the next section of the chapter, you will come across that if it is an artery, arteries are always supposed to carry oxygenated blood actually. Arteries are always supposed to carry oxygenated blood. But now I'm saying that it is carrying deoxygenated blood because This is one artery which is an exception. Otherwise, apart from the pulmonary artery, all other arteries of the body carry oxygenated blood. Pulmonary artery is an exception. Again, when I talk about this pulmonary vein, I'm saying that this is the vessel. Which vessel carry blood from the lungs to the heart? It is the pulmonary vein. All veins of the body carry deoxygenated blood. Pulmonary vein is an exception. When we study transportation and heart, you will come across that every time we talk about a vein carrying impure blood, deoxygenated blood. But it is only one such vein, that is the pulmonary vein, which is carrying pure blood from the lungs to the heart. So what are these two special, the two special blood vessels we are talking about? One is pulmonary artery. Being an artery, it is carrying impure blood, deoxygenated blood. Pulmonary vein, being a vein, it is carrying pure blood. Okay. Now let us go back to this concept of the lungs again. We go back to the concept of the lungs. What is the lungs made up of? Numerous air sacs. What are these air sacs called? These air sacs are called alveoli or alveolus. Two special features again to remember, because we are going to understand gaseous exchange now. To remember, number one, thin wall made up of epithelial cells. One single layer of epithelial cells. तो one single layer of epithelial cells से बना है तो क्या special feature है? It can allow the process of diffusion. It can allow the process of diffusion. And richly supplied with blood vessels, मतलब surrounding every particular alveolus or the entire lungs. The entire lungs is actually pinkish in color. क्यों? The entire lungs made up of alveolus. They don't have any cells inside. Har ek single alveolus is just like a balloon to understand. Then how come that pinkish reddish color? So many blood vessels surrounding. The color of that organ is only because of the blood vessels that it has. So many profuse blood vessels surrounding that organ. So otherwise, remove all the blood vessels, the organ is actually colorless. The entire structure, the lungs, is actually colorless because it is just made up of some fine membranous thin air sacs. So right now, I look into the lungs and try understanding that what would be the features of a alveolus. These are generally small balloon-shaped structures. So if this is an alveolus, after the process of breathing, I now start from here. The concept of breathing already you know. What is breathing? Inhaling or taking in of air. So now, if I talk about the first step of breathing, and that is inhalation. So after inhalation, I understand that the air which is filled up in the alveolus, every single alveolus, the condition is almost like this. The condition is almost like this. I am intentionally talking about more number of oxygen molecules here inside the alveolus. Can you tell me why? Inhalation के बाद, I gave you an introduction, I explained you a little bit about that at the start also. Now that I talk about inhalation, I'm not talking about other compounds here. मैंने यहाँ पे nitrogenous compounds, carbon compounds, कुछ भी मैंने नहीं लिखा यहाँ पे. Why did not I write? I did not write because these are not those compounds which will enter the body. We are only to talk about oxygen and carbon dioxide because these are type of respiratory gases. The body will take in, the body will release. So that's the reason. Here, right now, as we start understanding this process, we don't talk about any other compounds apart from any other gases apart from oxygen, carbon dioxide. But try understanding what I'm asking you. I'm saying inhalation ke baad, if I look into every single alveolus, the alveolus is always supposed to have more of oxygen and less of carbon dioxide. Why?
Because in our surrounding there is more amount of carbon dioxide.
नहीं. Oxygen ज़्यादा होता है after you are inhaling in your lungs. हर एक alveolus when examined, it is found that हर एक alveolus में oxygen ज़्यादा है then carbon dioxide. क्यों?
Because of the blood veins.
Blood नहीं, it's not related with the blood. You are inhaling what? You are inhaling what? Air. So, is it related with the air? Is it related with the composition of the air? Air, when I talk about atmospheric air, what is the percentage of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the atmospheric air? 21%. I talk about 1 ml of the air that we are inhaling. 1 ml of the air में 21% oxygen है. And what is the percentage proportion of carbon dioxide? If I talk about oxygen is 21%, then what about carbon dioxide? Carbon dioxide is 0.03%. There's a big difference. Unless and until we talk about some polluted places, if I now talk about an extremely polluted place, a crowded place here, then we are inhaling more of carbon dioxide. That is a different thing. But normally, whenever we take in air, whenever we are inhaling, our lungs has more of oxygen than carbon dioxide every time. Now, next is what? The next feature that we are going to understand is the blood. So, which vessel will carry blood towards the lungs? Pulmonary artery. Pulmonary artery will carry blood towards the lungs. So, say suppose I understand one such blood vessel going very close to the alveolus. So, this is the blood vessel which is going very close to the alveolus. Now, I draw in blue trying to understand that this blood which is initially deoxygenated. The blood is initially deoxygenated. In all these concepts, you will always come across the concept of deoxygenated is always shown in blue. And the concept of oxygenated is always shown in red. So blood vessels, heart related, breathing related, transportation related, always you will come across. So now let us start with the first one. So I am talking about the first blood vessel, that is the pulmonary artery. So let us start with this, pulmonary artery, carrying blood towards the lungs. Pulmonary artery carrying blood towards the alveolus. Now in the blood, there are certain type of cells. I would start thinking of the RBCs. What type of cells? RBCs. RBCs have got a particular pigment, and this particular pigment is known as what? Hemoglobin. What is the color of hemoglobin? Hemoglobin is reddish in color. What is hemoglobin? It is the respiratory pigment. Where is it present? In the RBCs. So this respiratory pigment is actually what is responsible for the red color of the blood. Why is blood red in color? Why is blood red in color? Blood is red in color because of the presence of hemoglobin. Otherwise, the liquid part of the blood, what is the liquid part of the blood? The plasma. The liquid part of the blood is actually colorless. So the color of the blood red is only because of hemoglobin. So now I start thinking that the pulmonary artery which is carrying blood towards the lungs, I think of just one single alveolus right now. So the blood which is moving towards the alveolus is deoxygenated. And this deoxygenated blood, I intentionally show in blue. Always try to remember the blood is impure, meaning it has got more of carbon dioxide. It has got more of carbon dioxide. Now, next one. Now, this hemoglobin of the RBC has got a great bonding capacity with oxygen. So I could write hemoglobin has a great affinity for, affinity means what? Can easily make bond. Has a great affinity for oxygen. So when I talk about that hemoglobin has a great affinity for oxygen, what do you understand? You should understand that the bonding capacity of hemoglobin and oxygen is very, very sharp. Immediately the bond will be formed. So the oxygen now starts diffusing from the alveolus towards the blood. What is the process going on now? Now that I say this process is happening, what process you are supposed to understand? Which process is this? The process is diffusion. Then what is the rule? Diffusion का rule क्या है? Any molecule moving from a region of high concentration to a region of low concentration. तो अगर मैंने movement of oxygen from here to here अगर मैं दिखा रही हूँ, then what are you understanding? Oxygen concentration low कहाँ पे है? I compare the lungs and the blood. Oxygen concentration low is where? In the blood. In the blood. So hamesha when you compare the lungs and the surrounding blood vessel, concentration of oxygen is low in the blood, always high in the lungs. So what will be the direction of movement of oxygen? always from lungs to the blood. Always from lungs to the blood. ऐसा कभी भी नहीं होगा where oxygen is moving from blood to the lungs, because whenever and at any part of the time, at any time of the day, if we compare, the blood always has got lesser amount of oxygen than the lungs. Now, this hemoglobin and oxygen will form a bond. The hemoglobin and oxygen, they form a bond. So, oxygen has come down from the lungs to the blood. Hemoglobin is waiting there to get attached with the oxygen molecule. Now, they form a temporary compound. What is the name of this temporary compound? The name of this temporary compound is oxyhemoglobin. The name of this temporary compound is oxyhemoglobin. What is the name of the temporary compound formed in the blood at the respiratory surface? Respiratory surface matlab lungs. Lungs ke paas. So when you get this type of questions, you should immediately understand. So I give you a question that name the temporary compound formed near the respiratory surface. Matlab near the lungs kaun sa temporary compound form hota hai? The answer is oxyhemoglobin. So oxyhemoglobin formed between hemoglobin and oxygen. Now that the blood is transporting, so this blood vessel, now that I understand, this blood vessel is carrying oxygen, but in what form? How does the blood carry oxygen? Your answer is always blood carries oxygen in the form of oxyhemoglobin. The blood is always carrying oxygen in the form of oxyhemoglobin. Now tell me, अब जब enough oxyhemoglobin बन गया है, can I say that the blood is still deoxygenated? Is the blood still deoxygenated? Gaseous exchange. This is one part of gaseous exchange हो चुका है. Now that the oxygen has come down to the blood, is this blood still deoxygenated? No, it is no more deoxygenated. अभी धीरे-धीरे blood is getting rich in oxygen. तो उसको क्या बोलेंगे? Oxygenated. Now the blood is oxygenated. Okay. So now I would show that, okay, now slowly this blood is no more deoxygenated, but it is now getting oxygenated. This blood is now becoming oxygenated. It is rich in oxygen. But as it is rich in oxygen, this blood vessel in the course of circulation will come across certain type of tissues. This particular blood vessel coming from the lungs definitely will move all throughout parts of the body. The blood vessels in our body are in the form of a network. Any blood vessel which is moving from or coming from the lungs, will it remain confined there? No, it will move on. The blood vessels are in the form of a network. So the blood is moving. The blood is moving constantly. How is the blood transporting oxygen? The blood is transporting oxygen in the form of oxyhemoglobin. But now that this blood vessel comes in contact, say suppose I understand that this blood vessel comes in contact with certain muscles now, certain tissues, the stomach, the liver, the intestine, etc. Then what is going to happen? So this is my blood vessel, and this blood vessel contains which compound now? Oxyhemoglobin. The moment the oxyhemoglobin comes near any tissues, what is the change? The change is, now we have to understand oxygen concentration kahan pe zyada, kahan pe kam. When I was comparing the alveolus and the blood, I told you blood has less of oxygen, so the oxygen is moving from the alveolus to the blood. Now what? Now I am comparing the blood with the tissues, and it is always found that the tissues have lesser concentration of oxygen than the blood. Then what should be the direction of oxygen movement? Blood to tissues. From blood to tissue. So now that this compound comes near the tissue surface, at the tissue surface, what is the fate of the oxyhemoglobin? Break हो जाता है. The bond breaks. जैसे ही oxyhemoglobin tissue के आसपास आएगा, when the blood is near the tissues, blood में जितने भी oxyhemoglobin molecules रहेगा, that will get broken, and this oxygen now is diffused into the body cells. So now the body cells getting so much of oxygen. Now the body cells are getting the oxygen. So how does the body cells get the oxygen? How does the liver and the pancreas and the muscles and the bones get the oxygen from the blood? So whenever I'm comparing the muscles and the blood vessels, kahan pe zyada hai oxygen? In the blood. In the blood. When I'm comparing the wall of the stomach and the blood vessels, kahan pe kam hai oxygen? In the wall of the stomach. So if that part is clear, so at the respiratory surface, what is the direction of the oxygen movement? Always from the blood to the tissues. Now the next concept is, अब जब ये cells have taken the oxygen, what are they going to do with this oxygen? What are they going to do with this oxygen? They are going to break down the glucose with the help of this oxygen. They are going to break down glucose with the help of oxygen. क्या था definition of cellular respiration?
Oxygen to release carbon dioxide
And energy. So now, if I want to see that what is happening in this body cells, now that we have come across that yes, the body cells are getting oxygen. Body cells में glucose पहले से ही था. How did the body cells get the glucose? By the way of absorption, assimilation. So this glucose the body cells got by the way of assimilation, distribution of nutrients by the blood. ये nutrition का continuity we are talking about. So the blood cell, the body cells, every single body cell, the bone, the liver, the pancreas, the intestine, every single bone, body cell will get the nutrients by the way of assimilation. And now by the process of tissue respiration, we are talking about oxygen that comes in. And now what are the products? The products would be carbon dioxide and water and energy. Right now we are only talking about this carbon dioxide. What happens to the carbon dioxide? So now tell me, now that the tissues have undergone the process of cellular respiration, where is carbon dioxide concentration more? Tissue में ज़्यादा या blood में ज़्यादा? नहीं, tissues में ज़्यादा. Because every cell is going through this process. The millions of cells, the hundreds and hundreds of cells of the liver and the pancreas and the bone, हर एक cell के अंदर ये process हो रहा है. So definitely in any tissue or in any organ, every cell has got this carbon dioxide. So much carbon dioxide released. So what will be the direction of carbon dioxide transport then? The carbon dioxide will be diffused from tissues to the blood. In the tissues and less in the blood. So ये जो पूरा process we are going to come across, remember rule is only one. What is that rule? Diffusion. जहाँ पे molecule ज़्यादा होगा, wherever the gaseous molecule is more, from the region of higher concentration, the molecules are moving to a region of lower concentration, only that. So now that the carbon dioxide has been diffused from the tissues towards the blood, अभी carbon dioxide will not behave exactly like oxygen. अब oxygen का क्या behavior था? All the oxygen got bonded with hemoglobin. Hemoglobin does not like carbon dioxide that much. Hemoglobin has a strong affinity for oxygen, but low bonding capacity with carbon dioxide. So here I would mention that hemoglobin has low binding capacity or bonding capacity with carbon dioxide. So because of this reason, all the carbon dioxide does not get bonded with hemoglobin. So what will happen to this? A small amount of hemoglobin will get bonded with carbon dioxide, but a major portion of the a major portion of the carbon dioxide will remain in the blood in the form of carbonic acid, जिसको bicarbonate ions भी कह सकते हैं. So is the blood now again becoming progressively deoxygenated? Yes, when the blood is moving from the tissues, the blood is progressively becoming deoxygenated. When the blood is moving towards the tissues, the blood is oxygenated. When the blood is moving away from the lungs, the blood is oxygenated. When the blood is moving towards the lungs, it is deoxygenated. Is this clear?
So now the blood is now with deoxygenated.
The blood has picked up so much of carbon dioxide. Now the blood which is moving away from the tissues again starts becoming deoxygenated. So in course of circulation, now we are understanding it's a single. Now for ease of understanding, what I am drawing is I am just drawing a single blood vessel. But हमारे body में इस तरह से hundreds and hundreds of blood vessels are there forming a network. So the blood is not stagnant at any part of our body. The blood is constantly moving. The blood which is picking up oxygen from the lungs, moving towards the liver, coming out from the liver, going out and again coming back to the heart. So the process of circulation is constantly happening. And ऐसा भी नहीं है that every single blood vessel will pass through only one tissue. So many tissues. It is the same blood which may pass through the liver also, the stomach also, the legs also, the toes also, and coming up. So that means the blood picks up so much of carbon dioxide from different tissues. So whenever it passes by the tissues, picking up carbon dioxide, the blood becomes deoxygenated again. Let me complete, and then again you will have to try understanding the complete summary. Now again I may think that what would be the fate of this deoxygenated blood then? How will this carbon dioxide be released out? This carbon dioxide will have to be released out again by the process of diffusion. Then how by the process of diffusion again? If I understand that this particular compound made of hemoglobin and carbon dioxide, since at the respiratory surface, what did we draw earlier? The composition of the inhaled air. Carbon dioxide more and oxygen is more and carbon dioxide is less in the alveolus, carbon dioxide more in the blood. So what will be the direction of the carbon dioxide flow at the respiratory surface? Blood to alveolus. Now, again, let me just make it very clear. So here what is happening? Inside the lungs, the oxygen concentration is always more. So when this blood comes near the alveolus, what type of respiratory gases will be given? Here also I could have told you this, that if I talk about a compound like this, the carbon dioxide will move here. The oxygen will be taken up and the carbon dioxide will be given. Okay, so I showed you separately so that there is no confusion for you. So here I am talking about now, if this compound of hemoglobin and carbon dioxide is in the blood, in the alveolus, concentration of carbon dioxide is less or more than the blood? Lesser. What will be the direction of the carbon dioxide movement? Always from the blood to the alveolus. What is the direction of oxygen movement? Alveolus to blood. What is the definition of gaseous exchange that you have written? Check. What is the definition? Diffusion of oxygen from the alveolus to the blood. Correct? So then which part is gaseous exchange now to summarize? Gaseous exchange कौन सा है? Gaseous exchange ये जो part है, this is gaseous exchange, and ये जो part है, this is gaseous exchange. ये जो part है, this is gaseous exchange. So I am talking about this entire concept. This is gaseous exchange. What is the concept of gaseous exchange? Diffusion of oxygen from alveolus to blood and carbon dioxide from blood to alveolus. तो ये carbon dioxide जो अभी lungs में deposit हो रहा है, how will it come out of the body? Exhalation. During the process of exhalation, this carbon dioxide will be released out. We will talk about this again in the next topic. तो ये हो गया gaseous transport, gaseous exchange. Then what is tissue respiration? You had come across movement of oxygen from blood to tissues, carbon dioxide from tissues to blood. This is tissue respiration. So tissue और blood के बीच में जो exchange हो रहा है, this is tissue respiration. What is cellular respiration? हर एक cell में जो process हो रहा है, that is the breakdown of the glucose, utilizing the oxygen. Can this process happen in the yeast cells? Can this process happen in the cells of the bacteria? Can this process happen in the cells of a bacteria? Q? Can this process happen in the cells of a bacteria? Samjho? No. Absence. So this is a process, this process that we are learning is majorly for all developed organisms. We are talking about human respiratory system. But yes, though we are talking about human respiratory system, ये system लगभग same है if I talk about all vertebrates. All vertebrate system लगभग same है, but then if I talk about yeast and bacteria and the simple single-celled organisms, no, they will never show this process क्योंकि उनके cells के अंदर oxygen है ही नहीं. Clear? Now I had explained you exchange of gases in two parts and tissue respiration and cellular respiration. I'll give you 2 minutes. देखो समझ में आ रहा है कि नहीं? If there's any confusion, clarify करो. If you understand this, then so many questions you'll be able to answer on your own. कोई problem नहीं है.
Ma'am, a group of cells from tissue or tissue.
Group of cells form tissue.
So how can tissue like transport the
This is the entire tissue which I am showing where the process is happening in every single cell. So why is it known as tissue respiration? Because now that I talk about that, this is the blood vessel surrounding the muscles of the leg. This is the blood vessel surrounding the kidneys. This is the blood vessel surrounding the wall of the stomach. So all these parts of the body will be considered as a tissue. Because blood से oxygen tissue में जाएगा and carbon dioxide from the tissues will move to the blood again. तो ये जो blood और tissue के बीच में जो exchange of respiratory gases होता है, उसको बोलेंगे tissue respiration. और lungs and blood के बीच में जो होगा, that is called gaseous exchange.
Yeah, but after tissue respiration, like how cellular respiration?
नहीं, अच्छा, tissue respiration मतलब tissue is a group of cells. So now I'm saying that the oxygen moving towards the tissue has 100 cells. So वो हर एक cell के अंदर वो oxygen जाएगा and every cell is showing that process of breakdown of the glucose. Tissue मतलब when I talk about the wall of the stomach may have 1000 cells. तो हर एक 1000 cells में हर एक single cell में oxygen enter होगा, glucose breakdown होगा, carbon dioxide release होगा. So overall tissues में carbon dioxide concentration ज़्यादा है blood vessels से. Am I clear? आया समझ में? Draw नहीं किया. हाँ, करो. This concept should be very clear. The next class I'm going to show you some more images, some questions I'm going to give you. But देखो ये समझ में आ रहा है कि नहीं? आया समझ में? We'll take one question also. Explain how.
Could you explain the last part again?
Last part में मैं ये explain कर रही थी कि when I talk about that ये जो blood vessel progressively when it again comes across the alveolus मतलब surrounding the alveolus जो भी blood vessel रहेगा. Now I want to understand carbon dioxide का क्या status है. Initially I started with oxygen. अभी carbon dioxide की क्या status है? Looking into any blood vessel surrounding the alveolus, carbon dioxide concentration blood में हमेशा ज़्यादा रहता है as compared to the alveolus. जो मैंने यहाँ पे भी बोला था, but here I wanted to only show you for oxygen first. तो अभी यहाँ पे क्या हो रहा है? Compare the blood and the alveolus. कहाँ पे carbon dioxide ज़्यादा? Blood में. Blood में ज़्यादा. Because the blood vessels are majorly coming from the tissues. So अभी this carbon dioxide will it remain in the blood? No, this carbon dioxide will get diffused to the alveolus. Q. Diffusion. A rule where the molecules should always move from a region of high concentration to a region of low concentration. So ये जो diffusion है, tissue respiration है, ये जो दो major processes है of respiration, that is basic diffusion. The direction of oxygen and carbon dioxide movement is majorly based on diffusion. ठीक है? Now, if this is clear, first of all, in steps, you should know how to write. ये 3 mark का question आता है, 1 mark का आता है, 2 mark, various different type of questions. So basic on 1 mark के questions है. I'm going to give you the question. You should be able to answer. देखो, only that exchange of gaseous, the gaseous transport the concept in points. Only that I will give you. Right, number 1. Write down the questions now. Number 1. Name the respiratory pigment. Name the respiratory pigment present in the blood. Name the respiratory pigment present in the blood. हाँ, लिखना पड़ेगा. अभी खाली questions लिखो. Name the respiratory pigment present in the blood. Leave 1 line for your answer. एक साथ मत लिखो questions. No. Gap छोड़ो. I will give you time to answer. एक line छोड़ो. Go to the next question. What is diffusion? What is diffusion? What is diffusion? 2 lines. Number 3. Number 3. What is the direction of oxygen movement? What is the direction of oxygen movement at the respiratory surface? What is the direction of oxygen movement at the respiratory surface? Question mark. Give respiratory surface. Bracket में लिख के रखो. Later also when you refer you may forget. Respiratory surface मतलब हमेशा याद रखना है near the lungs. Near the lungs. Give reason. 3-4 lines for your answer. 3-4 lines for your answer. Number 4. Explain the transport of. This I will give you. Explain the transport of oxygen and carbon dioxide. Transport of oxygen and carbon dioxide. Explain the transport of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the human body. Explain the transport of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the human body. Answer लिखो. You write in points, so पढ़ना easy है, remembering is easy, and understand. I'm giving you time. समझो. If you have understood this, 2-4 बार revision. Don't go for mugging up. It will be a mess in your answer. Point number 1. After the process of inhalation, the lungs are filled with air. The lungs are filled with air. Full stop. Every alveolus has a higher oxygen concentration than the surrounding blood vessels.
Higher concentration
Then the surrounding blood vessels. Blood vessels. Then the surrounding blood vessels. Full stop. Thus, oxygen. Continue. I'll tell you when to change the point. Thus, oxygen diffuses. Thus, oxygen diffuses from alveolus towards the blood. Oxygen diffuses from alveolus towards the blood. Full stop. Next point. Number 2. Next point. The respiratory pigment in the blood. That is hemoglobin. Check spelling. Check karo. Mistake nahi. Hemoglobin is not HEMO. HAEMO. Respiratory pigment in the blood. Hemoglobin. Respiratory pigment in the blood. That is नहीं, hemoglobin is the main word you should write in the answer. Respiratory pigment of the blood, that is hemoglobin, binds with oxygen, forming a temporary compound,
Compound.
binds,
Compound.
binds with hemoglobin, forming a temporary compound, oxyhemoglobin. Full stop. Blood carries oxygen, same point. Blood carries oxygen in the form of oxyhemoglobin. Third point. Oxyhemoglobin breaks down. Oxyhemoglobin breaks down near the tissue surface. Oxyhemoglobin breaks down near the tissue surface. And oxygen diffuses towards the tissues. Full stop. Every single cell of the tissues, utilizes the oxygen for the breakdown of glucose, and releases carbon dioxide and energy. A process known as, क्या लिखना है? A process known as, cellular respiration. All of you got the points till here? Number 4 है अभी. Number 4 है. 4 लिखना है अभी. Number 4. The carbon dioxide concentration is higher in the tissues. Carbon dioxide concentration is higher in the tissues as compared to the surrounding blood vessels. Thus, carbon dioxide diffuses towards the blood. Same point, continue. A small fraction of carbon dioxide forms a temporary compound. Missed out? Miss kiya? You missed out anything? क्या?
Temporary.
पूछो. Ask your friend.
Temporary.
लिखा? Where did I stop?
Temporary compounds.
Before that,
A small fraction of CO2 form the temporary
compound with hemoglobin. With hemoglobin. And a larger fraction remains in the blood plasma, and a larger fraction remains in the blood plasma as carbonic acid. Larger fraction remains in the blood plasma as carbonic acid. इसको bicarbonate ions भी बोला जाता है. So within bracket ये लिख के रखो. Within bracket ये लिखो. Also bicarbonate ions. So within bracket you will write this. Last point. The temporary compound of hemoglobin and carbon dioxide. The temporary compound of hemoglobin and carbon dioxide breaks down at the respiratory surface, and carbon dioxide breaks down at the respiratory surface, and carbon dioxide diffuses. Towards the, क्या लिखना है? Towards the lung alveolus or lungs. Carbon dioxide diffuses towards the lungs.
And sir, if it all breaks down at the respiratory surface, can we write near lungs?
Near lungs. Respiratory surface, and carbon dioxide diffuses towards the lungs, which is released out during exhalation. Clear है? Now the first three questions which I gave you, try to answer on your own. देखो उसमें कुछ doubt है क्या? देखो उसमें doubt है. We have to discuss one small activity.
Glucose.
What's the first question?
Name the respiratory hemoglobin.
कहाँ glucose? Hemoglobin. Why is, you also get this question? Why is hemoglobin known as respiratory pigment? क्या लिखना है? Because it can bind with respiratory gases, oxygen and carbon dioxide. इसीलिए इसको respiratory pigment कहा जाता है. Respiratory pigment. देखो बाकी
with oxygen, carbon dioxide, or any other gas.
नहीं, respiratory gases तो carbon dioxide and oxygen ही है.
But in while inhalation we take in air.
We take in air, but hemoglobin does not bind with nitrogen oxide. Hemoglobin does not bind with nitrogen or sulfur or phosphorus. अब lungs में तो वो सारे components भी है, but hemoglobin is binding only with oxygen or carbon dioxide. So इसीलिए respiratory gases. The first three questions, 2 minutes थोड़ा breathe करो, and then the first three questions try to understand and write on your own. If there's a doubt, ask. Complete करो पहले, then we move ahead. Number 1, done all of you?
Yes.
Number 2 क्या है?
What is the movement of substance from higher concentration to lower concentration known as diffusion?
Movement of
Higher concentration.
substances from a region of higher concentration to lower concentration is diffusion. Third क्या है? क्या दिया third question?
What is the direction of oxygen movement at the respiratory surface?
So ये first part check करो. At the respiratory surface meaning always to understand near the lungs. क्या लिखना है? What is the direction of oxygen movement at the respiratory surface? मतलब lung immediately to think lungs and blood. So कहाँ से कहाँ oxygen move होगा?
From the actual blood.
From the lungs towards the blood vessel. From the lungs towards the blood vessel. Complete करो.
Towards the blood vessel.
Towards the blood vessel.
Online answer.
These are all one-mark questions. Huh? For which one?
This one.
Which question was it?
What is the direction of oxygen movement at the respiratory surface? Give reason.
Acha, give reason. Give reason भी है. So what is the direction of oxygen movement from the lungs towards the blood? Reason क्या लिखेंगे? Because alveolus always has a higher concentration of oxygen than surrounding blood vessels. Reason ये लिखना है. देखो. Because alveolus has higher oxygen concentration than surrounding blood vessels. Because alveolus always has higher oxygen concentration than surrounding blood vessels. Okay, now one small activity. You will find this activity in your textbook. देखो textbook में एक छोटा सा activity है on respiration, not this. Yeah, this one. कौन सा page है बताओ?
27.
All of you find that activity there in your volume also and in the textbook. Volume में भी है and in the textbook also it is there. No, you don't have to write anything. Did you see that activity there?
Yes.
Which page is it?
87.
देखा? Now, what is this activity about? We take test tubes. We take a test tube. So first is we take a test tube. In the test tube, what are we taking? A chemical. What is that chemical? Lime water. So lime water का chemical composition is this. We are taking lime water. Lime water transparent colorless है. So in one test tube, we take, say suppose I name it A and B. So here in this first test tube, what are we taking? In both the test tubes, what are we taking? We take almost 3/4 lime water. Lime water again I repeat, transparent है, colorless है. Now in the first test tube, we start exhaling here. In the first test tube, we start exhaling. The second test tube, we just keep it as it is, room temperature में, as it is we are keeping. In the first test tube, once we had started exhaling, in some 5 minutes time, what do we observe? ये जो lime water है, which was transparent, it is now becoming little bit foggy हो रहा है. थोड़ा सा foggy हो जा रहा है. And if we continue, पहले 5 minutes and then we continue for another 5-7 minutes, now we get to see that in almost about 10-15 minutes, what is happening? It is becoming quite whitish हो जा रहा है, and this is what is known as the milky nature of the lime water. So पहले तो we were getting to see that जैसे lime juice कैसे होता है? What is the consistency? Liquid है, but transparent नहीं होता है. When you talk about the lime water, the lime juice and all, transparent तो नहीं होता है. It is foggy होता है. वो होता है foggy. So now the same thing we get to see, but you continue now. Keep on exhaling another 5 minutes, 7 minutes, 10 minutes. We get to see that the entire liquid जो transparent था, अभी थोड़ा सा जैसे granular substance आ गया. The entire thing has become white, foggy, too milky. What has happened? We are seeing that the lime water has turned milky. क्यों? Because during the process of exhalation, carbon dioxide has entered, And what is the new compound formed? All of you will take a note down there in the activity there. The new compound formed is carbon dioxide reacted with lime water, resulting in the formation of calcium carbonate and water. So what is the new compound formed? The new compound formed is calcium carbonate and water. So why the milky nature? When a question, why the milky nature? Because of the formation of a new compound, calcium carbonate. So it is same like I take a test tube, उसमें मैंने water ले लिया, and then एक small chunk of chalk मैंने अगर वहाँ पे डाल दिया, what will be the consistency of the water? Same ऐसे बन जाता है, granular बनेगा. So that is the milky nature because of this compound. After the break, tell me the answer for this. यहाँ पे we did not exhale, nothing we have done. But this test tube with the lime water, we keep in the room temperature for 10 minutes. We keep in the room temperature for 10 minutes. What will happen to this lime water? So after the break, we will continue problems. Will it turn milky? Yes. हाँ, की dance? चलो, take a break.
लास्ट टाइम बता रहा हूँ नहीं उल्टी की बात उल्टी बात हुआ नहीं
आशीष